Welcome to KU Hustle, the podcast about the entrepreneurs, innovators, and risk takers who spent time at the University of Kansas and then went and built something remarkable. I'm your host, Jessica Palm, and this is KU Hustle. Today, we have a special episode recorded in front of a live audience of students and alumni at the KU School of Business. It's a conversation between one of KU's most thoughtful and energetic leaders and a Jayhawk who has held executive roles at companies including AOL and Yahoo before becoming an industry leader on financial transactions in the digital age, the development of blockchain technologies, and cryptocurrency. His work has taken him all over the world, with much of his life being spent in Silicon Valley, Miami, and New York. Still, he finds himself deeply anchored and rooted in Lawrence, his hometown of Topeka, and the Kansas values that his family and education instilled in him. Putting people first, surviving hardship, finding opportunity where others can't, and taking the risk to bet on yourself even when others won't. I know you'll enjoy the special conversation between Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse and KU's own Nancy Jackson.
It is so wonderful to see so many friendly faces in this audience today. Brad's nervous because his mom's in the front row, but I'm a little nervous because seeing all of you here this morning, I feel the heat. But
I did not invite her. That was intentional.
So Brad, you and I met about 2011. And one of the things I remember most about that very first meeting and has stayed true to this day is that you are probably one of the proudest Kansans that I know. And I know a lot of them. And so talk us through a little bit. You grew up in Topeka, as Chancellor said, and your mother would attest. What was the best thing about growing up in Topeka?
Topeka. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'll also comment, the Chancellor correctly introduced Nancy Jackson as one of the senior leaders of the endowment, but she's also a friend, and I've known her for a very long time. So I hope it'll be a more interesting discussion, I think, because it's not just some person interviewing me. We've known each other for a long time, and I think mutual admiration. Okay, so Topeka. Look, I have had an unbelievably interesting journey. It's taken me to all kinds of places in the world, and the thing I've always tried to remember is where I'm from. And I said, actually, literally right before we started, for me, Kansas is the real world. And there's a bubble in California. There's a bubble where I live now in Miami. There's a bubble in New York. There's definitely bubbles kind of all around. For whatever reason, Kansas to me is like that grounding place where, yeah, it's a little bit of everything. But it's kind of like, I think what the coasts miss is like, this is like real world stuff. This is like, yeah, you have some on the left, you have some on the right, but you have hardworking people who I think are more grounded and more realistic, maybe, and pragmatic. So growing up in Topeka, Topeka, in my opinion, I like Lawrence. Topeka now, Mom, it was great having dinner with you last night, but there aren't that many restaurants to choose from. So I love being from Topeka, and it's definitely a part of my identity. I mean, to this day, when people say, where are you from? I lived in California for 24 years. I'm not Californian. I lived here fewer years, I guess 22, 23 maybe. But I view myself as Kansan first, for sure, and I don't think I'll ever lose sight of that.
And so when I did first meet you, you were at AOL. And by that time, you'd already been in Silicon Valley for a good decade in very high positions. And you were surrounded by Ivy League degrees, and you yourself did go on from here to earn one of those. But you frequently talked about your Kansas degree, not that Harvard degree. And so I wonder if you could say a few words about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, you are shaped by the places you are, you're shaped by the friends you have, you're shaped by all of those things. And I don't want to take anything away. I went to Harvard Business School after going to KU, and it did open my eyes up. And I think one of the things we will talk about today is kind of some of the reasons why I remain very active in the KU Jayhawk ecosystem. Going to Harvard Business School opened up my eyes to all kinds of world opportunities that I didn't know even existed. And there's no doubt in my mind I would have not had the trajectory I had in Silicon Valley had I not gone to Harvard. The jobs I got, I would not have readily gotten coming out of KU that I'd had access to because of Harvard. Now, that being said, when people ask me like where I went to school, I say I went to Kansas. Yeah. And it's I think KU formed me more than Harvard formed me. And maybe that's, time, place, age, there's all kinds of things that affect that. But it isn't intended to be a slight against Harvard, because I have immense gratitude for kind of that how it impacted that trajectory. But I also think, interestingly, Harvard Business School, basically, there's about a class of 800-ish, 850 students every year. They take, literally, I'm not kidding, one person from University of Kansas. And I feel incredibly lucky that I was that person, but the class behind me had one person, the class after me had one person, and you look. And I have, even with that community, you look at how hardworking, people-oriented, because look, the success in life, I think people forget, it's not just how smart you are, it's how readily you can work with other people and hear them and kind of meet them where they are. And I think sometimes some of the smartest people I knew at Harvard Business School are not the most successful, because they're super smart, but they can't quite ground that intelligence into a way that impacts the people around them.
And so one of the things that you said the very first time that we got together, speaking of all of this, was that the advantage that Harvard graduates had, and that you had, was those connections, right? Because it opened your world, that you got to go to Silicon Valley, you got to meet people. So we created a thing together. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what it meant to you?
Yeah. So one of the first things, and again, this is around the time Nancy and I met, kind of early 2010s, I really believed that KU had some of the, incredibly smart people. The top 10% at KU, I think, can compete against any Ivy League out there. I say that with absolute certainty. But I think that top 10% sometimes doesn't know how to access, or that even some of it exists. I think that's probably changed in the last 15 years a little bit. But Nancy and I partnered and created something that we called the Tech Trek. And the idea was we sponsored it with another reasonably well-known tech alum named Brian McClendon, who really was the guy who started Google Earth and was a leader at Google for a long time. We financially supported, I think, 25 kids to come on the Tech Trek, and they would come to San Francisco. And for, I think it was a 3-day program. And Brian and I basically called in favors from all of our network out there. And we had these 25 students hosted at Uber and, I don't remember the list of companies, it's 15 years ago. But, some interesting companies, to expose them to those students to, it's not just about the Northeast Kansas corridor when you're graduating from KU as opportunities. It's not even, let's say, Chicago or Dallas or St. Louis. And, there are very talented designers who are graduating from KU who don't even know that Google's hiring people at, $140,000 a year starting salary for a design role. And by the way, if you go into that, then you are going to get exposed to other unique opportunities that changes that trajectory. And please know, I'm not taking anything away from the design jobs in Kansas City. It's just, I think the students coming out of KU should know those other options exist. And hopefully by exposing that to them, get an internship, get your starting job in other markets.
Right, all of which led to an investment in the KU Alumni's Career Network, which... Where's Heath? Heath is in the house. There he is, right there.
For those who don't know, Heath runs the KU Alumni Association, and he leaned into this idea right away as how do we activate the alumni? There are amazing, and some of them are in this room, and I have gotten the good fortune to get to know some of them. There are amazing alumni from KU who want to help, but people don't know that they're there or where jobs they're at. And by the way, I even, as we organized the Tech Trek, Nancy, remember, I didn't know who all the Jayhawks were in Silicon Valley. And so I leaned on the Alumni Association for who's in Silicon Valley. And yeah, I would just cold call them and say, hey, I'm a fellow Jayhawk, and we want to, I remember the guy I still keep up with, he was at Bleacher Report. I can't remember his name right now. Anyway, I'm getting old.
Aren't we all? Heath, how many mentors now on the platform?
We have over 16,000 Jayhawks on the platform, 11,000 are alumni.
16,000 on the platform.
And so for the students in here, what I hope you just heard is there are 16,000 job leads. Now you're going to want to narrow that down because that's a few too many. But I remember going to the Career Center in circa 1993, 1994, And, you know, that resource did not exist.
It did not. I mean, I remember going to the Career Center and my job lead was Revlon. Revlon. I could go interview with Revlon to stock grocery shelves. And I thought, you know, I think I'll go to San Francisco and work in investment banking, but thank you. So this, I mean, I think this is a huge thing, right? And it really helps remind all of us that it's alumni, it's these wonderful conversations that lead to tremendous innovation at the University of Kansas and help to connect alumni with students, with jobs, right, and really to drive this university forward. And then speaking of driving forward, and back to the Chancellor's comment about Ripple, one of those tech treks, of course, Ripple hosted students. We did this for 3 or 4 years. The last time Brad hosted at Ripple, and I was absolutely gobsmacked because I had been meeting, of course, all this time with Brad and trying to understand what in the world Ripple actually did.
I'm still figuring it out.
And what XRP was. And he got up in front of these students, and within a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes, had explained it so clearly that you could see on all their faces. They were nodding like, oh, obviously. And I thought, wow, so could you do that for this group?
Sure. I'm going to go, before I do that, I also want to go to an earlier question you asked. I think one of the problems with some parts of Silicon Valley is they try to explain things and prove to you they're smart in how they explain it. And I think it's a huge mistake. And it's like, how do you just explain something? I mean, back to my comment of meet people where they are. I'm not suggesting those students weren't smart. It's just, this isn't the world they come from. And I think sometimes I read stuff, or even particularly in crypto, I think the echo chamber of crypto, I'm like, I don't understand what you just said. Like, it's crazy. So where Ripple started was to solve a simple problem, and that is moving money. And today we've all had experience, well, you know, not too many people write checks, not too many people do those things anymore. If everybody were on Venmo, wow, that would be easy, right? Well, not everybody's on Venmo. There's a whole bunch of different networks. And the way I think about this, because I'm doing a quick survey of the audience, there's some people more my age than my son's age. You know, back when the internet was getting started, you had CompuServe, you had Prodigy, you had AOL. You know, you couldn't send an email from Prodigy to AOL. You could only communicate within a closed network. Our payment networks are the same thing. Venmo is a closed network. Until very recently, you couldn't move money from Venmo to PayPal, and PayPal owns Venmo. Like, that doesn't make sense. But it's because of how our payment networks are configured. The highest friction is sending money overseas. Now, either from a professional point of view or a personal point of view, if you've ever had the unfortunate need to send money overseas, it is painful, it is expensive, it is slow, and mistakes happen and it gets lost for 2 weeks and you have to go track down. Rarely do you ever lose your money, but it's really frustrating. And what I used to say is, in a world where you literally can stream video from the space station, how can you not move your own money from A to B in a simple, reliable way? Ripple went out to solve that problem. And in our technology, by the way, everything I've said, you'll notice, I didn't say crypto. I didn't say XRP. Like, consumers don't understand how it impacts them, customers. And does anybody here really care if it went through XRP to solve that problem? You don't care. But what you do care about is, was it fast? An XRP transaction is about 4 seconds anywhere in the world. Is it cheap? It's fractions of a penny to move that money. Now, we decided to go, instead of signing up individuals, we sell our technology to banks, financial institutions around the world. I'm sure we'll talk about, we ended up getting sued by the US government, which meant that our US business was very stagnant for about 5 years. That's changed now, but hopefully that was the simple description that I kind of gave then.
It was, and let's go one more step, because I think a lot of people are very confused when they hear blockchain.
Yeah.
So very quick description of blockchain.
So everyone here knows, you're in the school of business, and G-Day would be upset if you didn't know this. A blockchain is a ledger. A blockchain is, you know, debits and credits, and it's an open framework where anyone can see those debits and credits, and they are immutable in that if a blockchain transaction has happened, you can't change it in the past. So it's always there. You can always see who has done it. That makes it, you know, kind of an open ledger. I'm trying to think of other good definitions of blockchain. To me, it's how do we use these technologies? Just because a blockchain is cool and can do interesting things, I think, like, so what? It's like, what problem does it solve for a consumer, a business, what have you? And again, that's where Ripple has tried to focus on, let's apply these technologies in a way that meets the customer where they are, and again, mostly financial institutions. But it's an open ledger that allows transactions to be tracked and not changed on a backwards basis.
And XRP, if I'm not wrong, which I utterly might be, is the vehicle by which you achieve that.
Yeah, so there are multiple different cryptos. I was talking to a couple people. There's a professor here who used to teach a Bitcoin class, and I said, Bitcoin is the most well-known, but Bitcoin is not good for some use cases. So Bitcoin on a per transaction basis can cost $10 per transaction. On a speed of transaction, it can take 10 minutes to settle a transaction. And that's not an anti-Bitcoin comment. It's just a different strokes for different folks. And the way the internet works, you have different protocols and different technologies that do different things. XRP is very good for payments because it's very fast and very cheap and scales well. Bitcoin, less so. But XRP is the open source blockchain that Ripple uses in our technology stack to solve a payments problem.
Okay, so you just heard why XRP is so important to the business that Ripple does. So why was the SEC so mad at you?
They're jerks. Well, actually, I will comment on that in a minute. There is something inherent that's interesting. So a new thing comes along, and you take old laws and old regulations. You say, how do you apply those regulations to this new thing? That happened with the internet, right? In the early, I got involved. I was first introduced to the internet in 1994, and we didn't have laws. Well, then along comes the late 90s. And yes, Al Gore didn't really invent the internet, but he did help create regulation around the internet. And there was something in 1996 called the Telecom Dereg Act, which provided certainty about how these technologies would be regulated. And by that certainty, then you have investors lean in and say, oh, if you're an entrepreneur, now you have clarity and you're not worried about getting sued. Crypto was kind of clamoring for the same type of thing. Like, how do we make sure that we understand how these will be regulated? What laws we need to follow, because the point I have made time and time again, the vast majority of people I know in crypto, they want to be good actors, but you got to give them the rules of the road. And if you won't give them the rules of the road, then that makes it hard. So the United States Securities Exchange Commission, which of course regulates securities, they took the contention that XRP, the digital asset kind of native to our technology stack, that was a security and not a currency or not a commodity. It was a security. Okay, so what does that mean? We're in the School of Business. Well, if it's a security, typically that means you have right, title, or interest in a company. Now, if you went out and bought XRP, you did not own shares of Ripple. Ripple is a private company, today still a private company. We raised venture capital in 2012, 2015, and 2016, and we issued shares. Those are securities. And those are things that give the rights to vote on who's on the board of directors, or should there be dividends, and all those kinds of things. XRP is more analogous to Bitcoin. Right. There isn't a company. Ripple cares about it a lot. We own a lot of XRP, but we can't control it because it's open source. So the SEC took the contention and they sued the company, saying, you have been selling unregistered securities. And that's illegal. You can't do that. Now, it isn't a criminal issue, but it's a parking, a parking ticket kind of thing. In this case, the parking ticket would have cost a lot of money. And we were kind of like, wait a minute. And I said earlier about them being good actors or bad actors, and I'll even reference the Kansan thing. I personally went into the SEC's offices 4 times between 2017 and 2019. Not once did I take a lawyer with me because, why do I need a lawyer? I'm just telling you, here's how we use this technology. To me, as a Harvard Business School graduate, not once did I think XRP was a security. Because it's like, well, security's that's owning Apple stock. It wasn't even close. What I found objectionable and kind of, I'll even go so far as to say distasteful and maybe even unethical, in all of those meetings, not once did someone say to me, Brad, we think XRP might be a security, you shouldn't do what you're doing. And that would have been like, oh, okay, let's talk about that. Not once did they say that. And then in 2020, they came along and said, we're suing you, the company, and we're suing you, Brad Garlinghouse, because I sold XRP. Which is that kind of means that there's a few people here in this audience I met on the way in who own XRP. That means, so everyone who sold XRP sold an unregistered security? It was bullshit. They were trying to put pressure on me as a human to settle with them. And even, again, something not widely known, they offered me a settlement to pay a fine, and they dropped the case against me, but they wouldn't drop it against the company, which is just like, it's just, I don't know, it just feels distasteful and maybe unethical. Like they weren't good faith, acting in good faith, where all along we were kind of saying, we want rules of the road. We're coming in to meet with you because we want to be clear about where the rules are and we follow the rules. Not once did you tell us what the rules are, and then after the fact, we're going to sue you, we're going to sue your company. That lawsuit cost us $150 million of legal bills. We fought for 4 years. We won that case, and then the then head of the SEC said he was going to appeal it, which you're just like, oh my God, does the nightmare ever end?
Yeah.
Now he was in, because of the, when Trump won, he appointed a new head of the SEC who has taken a totally different perspective on crypto and constructively kind of leaned in a way that I think has been good for the industry. If we want this industry to succeed in the United States, we need that type of engagement.
I want to think about leadership in business and culture, in a lot of the ways that we've been talking about here in terms of your participation as an alum, all kinds of things. And I actually want to pull us back to what this morning was about, which is angel investing, and which actually goes back to some of the beginnings of PayPal you mentioned earlier, and crypto, all kinds of things. So when you think about angel investing, which maybe not everybody here knows, but Brad has a long history with, and we had some conversations about early. And I'm wondering if you could talk to, for a lot of kids in this room, maybe thinking about entrepreneurship and kind of careers that they hope may look like yours, right? As an investor, are you looking at the person, the idea, the momentum, the moment? What are you looking for as an investor?
So there's a Warren Buffett-ism, which I'm sure I'm going to butcher, and somebody here can correct me, but it's roughly, if given an amazing team in a bad market or a great market with an okay team, you take the market. Now, I happen to sort of disagree with this. I know Nancy and I talked about this a bunch years ago, but when you're an angel investor, in my opinion, you don't know the market. Particularly, I'm thinking of tech, because most of the tech angel investing, it's like, I'm working on self-driving cars 10 years ago, and you're like, you have no idea if that's going to be a market, and you're making bets about where the world's going. When I got involved with Ripple, you had no idea that crypto is going to be a $3 or $4 trillion market. And so when I am looking at entrepreneurship, and if I were on Shark Tank KU, the number one thing I care about isn't the idea you're pitching me, it's who are you? What is your conviction, and how dogmatic and hardworking, and entrepreneurship is hard, and how people respond to being told no, how people respond to failure, I think will say a lot about their journey in life. And look, I actually, the first company I ever started was right here in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm guessing nobody, well, if you lived in Lawrence, Chris Shum's out here, he'll remember this. I opened a record store in 1994 in 10th and Mass, maybe it was 11th, 10th and Mass, called The End Compact Discs and Tapes. Now, this is right before the digitization of music was happening. Timing was terrible. I lost a bunch of money. It was awful. It was painful. I learned so much. I learned way more doing that than I did going to Harvard Business School, that's for sure. And so I think the entrepreneurs I look for are those that I think are going to respond well to failure, are going to be resilient in that, because you're going to get told no a lot, and how you respond to that's super important.
So you once told me something that I have now done in almost every interview I've ever conducted. You said that you always asked people how lucky they felt on a scale of 1 to 10, and that you wouldn't hire them unless they answered a certain number. Tell people why.
Okay, so look, I think actually Bill Self had a thing that they posted recently about how enthusiasm is infectious. It's kind of the same thing. Like, you want to be around people who are optimistic, particularly if you're an entrepreneur, because I can always come up with ways that something's not going to work. At Ripple, there's something that the team calls Bradisms, One of them is you can't bring the poop without the scoop. What that basically just means is any complaint, I'm here for it, okay? But you got to bring me solutions too. Yeah. And if you're just bringing me complaints, you're just a downer, man. Like it's just, I can always find ways that things aren't going to work. And so I think hiring people who have a good attitude and are positive and optimistic, particularly when you're building something from fresh cloth and new, like having that optimism is critical. And I even think, and I'll give the chancellor a huge shout out. Like I think that the change in the leadership at this university over the last 10 years cannot be overstated. It's unbelievable. The optimism, like he then surrounded himself with a bunch of optimists who have a positive attitude or can do, like how do we make it happen? So like the problem is if you're interviewing DJ, who I met on the way in here, and I say, hey, DJ, are you are you an optimistic, good attitude person? Yes. Yeah, DJ's going to say yes. You know what? I don't know if he's full of shit or not. Because it's such an obvious question that, like, you know that the interviewer wants to hear it's positive. So here's my secret. If I say to you, how lucky are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Now, like, this is an interesting little test. And you're all in your heads thinking, okay, how lucky am I on a scale of 1 to 10? I swear to God, if anybody in here says less than a 9, you're just full of shit. And I'm not trying to say that you haven't had bad things happen to you. Everyone here has. You were largely, I don't know every single person in the room, you were born in the first world. You have clean water. You had access to shelter. You had access to education. You're already in the top 5% of the planet. So when I ask people this and they give me a low number, I think this is not an optimistic, positive person. Mm-hmm. This is somebody who's feeling beaten down. And oh, by the way, maybe they really are unlucky, then you really don't want them. But, you know, I think in general, I always ask this question. I don't interview as many people as I used to because my team's kind of stable. But, you know, I view myself as like an 11 or a 12 on a scale of 1 to 10. Yeah. And there's a, you know, look, again, it's not, I don't want to take away from anyone who, I'm sure there's a cancer survivor in the room. And you know what, that sucks. Like, that is tough. There's lots of bad stuff that happens, but it's how you deal with those bad things. It's back to my earlier point. Like, how you deal with your failures will impact your trajectory more than anything else. And we're all going to have those. So I think the luck question gets to the heart of it without DJ just telling me he's, you know, a positive person, because I don't believe him.
No offense, DJ. So connected to that, I was lucky enough to once pitch a company to Brad. And my business partner and I had put together a wonderful slide deck.
I know what you're going to say.
And he really didn't want to see the slide deck, honestly. But we're like, you know what, we did it, we made it, can we just like show it to you? And he's like, fine. So we show it to him, and he's like, yeah, okay, that's sure, fine. And then we got to a certain point, and he said, you know this is just bullshit, right? Sorry for swearing. But what is your advice when somebody is wanting to pitch an idea to somebody who might invest? What should they be thinking about?
So I want to give a little more color to this, what Nancy's describing. So look, here's the tricky thing. I mean, look, on one hand, do I want to see that someone has thought through, here's what this could look like, here's a forecast, here's market penetration, here's all those things, yes. But then I feel like I've sat in too many pitches where somebody goes to the Excel spreadsheet output, and they're like, well, it's a $100 million market, and if we get 10% of this, it's like, you're just showing me you can do math. Whatever spreadsheet you put up there, it just shows that you know how to use Excel. We don't know. We don't really know, is it a $100 million market? You don't really know, can you get 10% of the market? We don't really know. Like, you're just guessing. And I love that you can guess well and put it in a nice spreadsheet, but that's all you're really proving to me. What's more interesting to me, again, as I said, is like, I want to know the person, particularly as an angel stage. I would have a different answer. I'm sure G-Day as the business school dean is kind of like, well, this stuff matters. But it matters more. It does matter. But it matters more when the company's been around for 5 years or 10 years, and now you have a track record. You can say, okay, here's what we did in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's what we think we'll do in 6, 7, 8. When you're at year 0, you have no idea. And so to me, I want to get to know the person. I want to know, what do they know about this market? What do they know about this market? And I also say, maybe controversially, sometimes entrepreneurs come and they came from the market they're in. Sometimes that's hard, because when you're from outside the market, it's somewhat easier sometimes to see how inertia and, oh, well, we've always done this, so we're going to keep doing it. Sometimes you're from outside the market, it's a little easier to disrupt the market, but that's a whole other thing.
Okay, so different question. How should people be reporting to their investors?
I'm going to dodge that question a little bit, to be honest with you, because I think it totally depends upon the investor. I've got a lot of things on my plate, and so I don't like to hear from the too often. Like, I don't want a weekly email. I got too much stuff going on, and that's just going to fill my inbox. But I think it's also, if there's some investments I've made where they don't communicate at all, and you're like, okay, come on, at least send me a quarterly or at the very worst annual. Hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we're working on. I think it's a delicate balance, and it depends a little bit on who your investors are. Some people want it'll be a little more hands-on. That's not my style.
Right. I did know that. Okay, quick questions now. Rapid fire. Most difficult decision you've ever made as CEO of anything. Doesn't have to be Ripple.
Well, just because we're on Ripple, I'll give the Ripple answer. I mean, we almost decided to shut down the company when the SEC sued us. We were like, look, the government has infinite power and resources, and again, they were so Chris Larson, who's the chairman of the company and the co-founder, and he and I have had a great partnership for a lot of years, and both of us were like, do we want to what's the right answer here? And we could have shut it down and distributed. The company owns a lot of XRP. You just distribute the XRP to shareholders on a pro rata basis. End of story. Okay, you guys think these are securities. Ripple doesn't own it anymore. Ripple's gone. Now, hundreds of people would have lost their jobs. I think that was a bad outcome, but in some ways it was the easier outcome. Yeah. And that was a difficult decision, and obviously I'm glad in retrospect, but that was not obvious at the time.
Yeah. Okay, how do you balance? So you've traveled, over the last several years, you've been traveling all over the world a lot. How do you balance innovation, which is the whole business, with the operational realities of a global company?
Well, I think my job has changed a lot since you and I met pre-Ripple, but my job has certainly changed a lot in that, I'm kind of, the CEO title changes from chief executive officer to chief evangelist officer. Yeah. And, a big part of my job is as the CEO, going and meeting with world leaders, going and meeting with bank executives, and, partly evangelizing crypto, and part evangelizing Ripple, because I think if it's good for crypto, it's good for Ripple. Yeah. As one of the major players here in the United States in crypto, we have tried to do what's right for the industry. But the balance in that regard and how my job has changed, and kind of reorganizing to kind of push and put that responsibility on people who work for me, and then to do quarterly business reviews to check in, like where are we on these things. And I'm still a pain in the butt to my team, and I'll send them an occasional hey, what's going on with this? Like, why haven't we, I'll read some article about what some company's doing. I particularly think we're at a stage in crypto where you're seeing consolidation and acquisitions. And so when I see other companies making an acquisition, I usually am like, what's the insight about why they're doing that, which I think can tell you a lot about what's going on.
And that's kind of another question that I think that we had from folks is, how do you stay informed? We're in this moment of a cacophony of information. How do you personally stay on top of things? I'm going to dodge this one a little bit as well. I mean, I'll give you my answer, but I don't think I'm very good at it, which is why. So I'll explain what I do, but I don't think it's perfectly working, partly because, as you said, the crypto industry has gone from small to big, a whole lot of players. One of the things I do is I have a weekly 30-minute, there's one person at the company whose job is competitive analysis and research. And he presents to me once a week for 30 minutes. Here's the stuff you may have missed and what I think are the insights about that. That sort of works. I do try to, we have a daily email of headlines in the industry. That sort of works. I think, as you said, and I think all of us live in a world, and you kind of were joking about email, I use the signal noise. Man, there's a lot of noise. Yeah. And I think it's very hard to filter the noise and focus on what matters. And by the way, when you hear that, that is a personal, professional, family, everything. There's a lot of noise going on. And that's why I kind of am anti-Instagram of just blah, 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 blah.
focus on the people you care about and what's going on with their lives and reach out to them. I think in profession, it's also like there's just a lot of noise, and figuring out what's real is hard.
And so connected to that, you famously, long ago, wrote a memo that was leaked called the Peanut Butter Manifesto, or referred to it as that. And talk about that, what the message there was, and whether you would still give that advice.
Oh, I think, so first of all, going back in time, Nance and I did not have gray hair, and I was at Yahoo in the early 2000s, early days for a bunch of years. And the people forget this, but those days, Yahoo was bigger, way bigger than Google. It was a huge part of the internet, and it was a super fun, interesting time. But I think Yahoo did lose its way. And as I'm prone to do, I was kind of speaking my mind at some staff meeting. And my then boss, who was the COO of Yahoo, was kind of trying to get me to shut up. And he was like, why don't you write down what you think? Well, thus was born this thing called the Peanut Butter Manifesto, which was Yahoo was spreading itself really thinly. And so we were in all these different businesses, and we were investing a little bit in all of them. And when you invest a little bit in a lot of things, it means you're average at a lot of things. You're not really good at anything. And the example I used is, even sitting here today, when I say the word Google, I bet everybody here thinks of search or mail, one or the other. Maybe that's changing in the world of AI. But if I say the word Yahoo, people it's just, the brand means nothing. It's so generic to so many things. And the point the Peanut Butter Manifesto made was, decide what you're going to be great at and be great at it. And yeah, you can have a secondary and tertiary things, but you've got to know what your true north is. I think this absolutely applies today. And I think if organizations, companies try to be too many things to too many people, they'll fail at all of them.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thank you, Brad Garlinghouse.
Thank you.